Introduction to Abyss Rover. After Han's skiing blew up the global internet, Jiang Zhou became the worst criminal in human history and fell into a long sleep. And when he woke up again 100 years later, what appeared before him was an out-of-control era intertwined with barbarism and civilization, filled with control and resistance. In the abyss, countless uncontrollable artificial intelligence wreaks havoc. Above Olympus, a super-enterprise that regards itself as a deity overlooks the masses. Within the basic reality, mortals struggle between suffering and madness. But the long night has passed, and dawn is approaching. When he woke up from his long slumber, the seeds of the intellectual revolution had already sprouted. Brain-computer interface, Mandala program, depth adjustment, mental index, Icarus syndrome, military zombies. On the eve of the end of this dark era, when someone asked Jiang Zhou who he really was, he replied, "I am one and all, I am the beginning and the end, you can call me the paradox itself. I am the first diver, the restart of Icarus, the gatekeeper of the land of Nord. I am the prisoner breaker, lighthouse thug, the one who plucks the golden branch, and the faceless god who governs the underworld. I have countless identities, just like the wind has countless directions, and mortals have countless ways of death. My name is." In other words, you are actually the only one in the entire organization. It's like this. No. 1. Good evening. You are listening at novelfull.audio. In order to allow the audience to further understand the technological prospects related to digital personality, our program team has invited Professor Zhou Shuguang, the CEO of Olympus Group and the overall leader of the Jiangzhou project, to the scene tonight. Let's give him a round of applause. Accompanied by enthusiastic applause from the audience, an elegant old man with gray-white hair, dressed in a straight suit, walked onto the stage with an imposing demeanor. He smiled and waved his hand at the camera, saying, "Good evening, audience friends. Good evening." Sitting in front of the bar, Jiang Zhou heard the voice of the old bastard on TV and expressionlessly drank the strong liquor in his glass, then pushed it to the bartender to signal him to add another round. The young bartender, wearing a black bow tie, took the glass and poured it inside, staring intently at the TV and asking, "According to online reports, the Jiangzhou project this person is working on seems to have been able to upload chimpanzee consciousness into a computer for immortality, and I don't know if it's true or false." Pure nonsense. Jiang Zhou took back the refilled glass as he spoke, and eagerly took a big sip. After the excitement of the alcohol subsided, he continued. Even if the most powerful quantum computer today is used to replace real analog input signals, the model of digital personality will undergo irreversible personality dissociation after running for 3 days, losing the ability to interact with the outside world. After running it again, it is unclear what inexplicable meaning it is. Let alone immortality. After uploading a personality into a computer, maintaining it for 3 days is enough. His tone is more like venting rather than explaining. But being able to maintain it for 3 days also indicates that the part of consciousness uploading has been successful, right? When the car was first invented, even a horse couldn't run. So, looking at it this way, uploading our digital personality in our lifetime and achieving true immortality is really not a dream. The bartender obviously didn't notice the emotions in the other person's tone. He wiped the cup in his hand and stared excitedly at the live broadcast on TV. At this moment, on the program, Today's Frontiers in Technology, Professor Zhou Shuguang, the general manager of the Jiangzhou project, is explaining a similar concept to the host. "Professor Zhou Shuguang, please allow me to interrupt. Do you mean that the Jiangzhou system actually cannot support the long-term existence of digital personalities? This is only temporary, just like how the differential machine failed to advance Britain's entry into the information age in the steam age, which was completely constrained by the technological foundation of that time. However, in reality, we are much luckier than Charles Babbage today. The iteration speed of quantum computers has far exceeded the upper limit of Moore's law, and I believe it won't be long." The voice of Zhou Shuguang, the project leader of Yanus, came out from the TV. Jiang Zhou turned his head and glanced at the spirited old bastard, speaking with a hint of bitterness. It won't be long. Yes, according to the current progress, in about 20 years, the hardware's computing power will be enough to meet the requirements. By then, humans will really be able to build a real paradise in reality. Do we need another 20 years? At this moment, the bartender's expression clearly became disappointed. It may not be that long either. Currently, there is still a lot of room for improvement in the algorithm of pseudo-neural networks. If optimized, it may significantly reduce the computational power requirements for hardware. Provided that those useless people can understand the plan I left behind. Put down the wine glass, said Jiang Zhou. The bartender nodded vaguely, then realized something and lowered his head to look at the other person. From the gentleman's tone, it seems that you are very familiar with the Yanus project. He asked in confusion. Upon hearing this question, Jiang Zhou couldn't help but burst out laughing uncontrollably. Very familiar with the Yanus project. Ha ha ha. Amidst bitter and self-deprecating laughter, permeated with despair of self-abandonment. He never imagined that as the true developer of the Yanus project, he would one day hear about this issue. So his laughter grew louder and louder, covering his face and laughing backwards and forwards, causing the bartender beside him to worry for a moment whether the person was crazy. The Yanus project, also known as the Artificial Neurological Utility Strategy based on JZ network simulation, is a subsidiary of the Olympus Group A.N.U.S. Named after the door god Janus in Roman mythology, a static brain model was established through cutting-edge high-precision scanning that can accurately measure the potential of each neuron. So, copy and upload human self-awareness. Or if more romantic, to the data card. Then, the JZ network is used to simulate sensory stimulation and physical feedback, thereby achieving the technological engineering of personality digitization. Undoubtedly, once this breakthrough technology is popularized, the future form of human society will undergo earth-shattering changes. All morals and laws, ethical norms, and social forms of the past will be reshaped, and even humanity itself will be redefined. Its significance is no less than 1 million years ago when human ancestors learned how to use fire. As for the person in charge of the Yanus project, whoever it is, he will undoubtedly leave the most profound mark in the history of human civilization. Today is Christmas in 2069 AD, a holiday commemorating the birth of a Western saint. It is not an exaggeration to say that from now on, this festival will be given another meaning. And the fame of the project leader of Yanus will surpass that of the Nazarene saint, becoming the most famous great figure in the world. The person in charge of the Yanus project, as recognized by the public, is Zhou Shuguang, the CEO of Olympus Technology, who is currently speaking confidently on the Today's Technology Frontier program. On the other hand, as the true developer of the Yanus project, Jiang Zhou can only stay in a remote bar and drink at this moment. Thinking of this, Jiang Zhou gritted his teeth and stopped his smile, picked up his glass and drank it all in one gulp. Sir, you've had enough to drink tonight. Looking at the empty wine glass being pushed over again, combined with the other person's inexplicable laughter just now, the bartender couldn't help but say with some concern. It's okay, just treat it as a tribute to humanity's bright future. Feeling the warmth slowly rising on his face, Jiang Zhou managed to control his expression and said. Then, using the strength of his wine, he leaned slightly closer to the bar and whispered to the bartender in a low voice. Didn't you just ask me why I'm so familiar with the Yanus project? Let me tell you, I'm actually the real person in charge of the entire Yanus project. You. The pouring of wine stopped, and the bartender carefully examined the man in front of him for the first time tonight. The man was in a blurry area between youth and middle age, thin and pale in stature, with a sickly appearance of overwork. As for his attire, even for a place like a bar with a mix of different cultures, it can be considered unkempt. The appearance of a programmer who could suddenly die due to excessive overtime doesn't seem to be related to the current Yanu's project that drives the world crazy. This person is so drunk the countless bartenders who read The Drunkard immediately came to the conclusion that after getting drunk, they claimed to be from a Centaur Alpha. There are people from all over the world who claim to be the person in charge of the Yanu's project, which is not so outrageous. But he couldn't help but point to Zhou Shuguang on the TV and ask. If you are the person in charge, what about him? Jiang Zhou sneered at this and said. An old miscellaneous who came out halfway to pick fruits, his only expertise is office politics. How could it be? A project of this scale? The bartender suppressed a sneer and asked. Why is it impossible? There were a few text traps on the contract, a top-notch team of lawyers, and some blatant and covert operations. Then, like magic, all research results naturally turned into the achievements of Professor Zhou, which had nothing to do with me anymore. Children, this world is not yet simple, just to the extent that it can be rewarded with talent and effort. Jiang Zhou spoke as if discussing parasites. As he spoke, he couldn't help but recall the day when both sides had a showdown. After poaching the technical backbone, squandering his own power, and suspending research progress, the old man arrogantly stated that as long as Jiang Zhou was willing to make concessions, he was still willing to include the name Jiang Zhou in the developer list of the Yanu's project. Even generously placed in the third row. In response, Jiang Zhou poured the hot coffee in his hand onto the other person's face. It was said that the other person had undergone cloning and skin grafting surgery afterwards to restore their current appearance on TV. Jiang Zhou knew for the first time that when a person is extremely angry, they will only feel that the whole world is as calm as freezing. The only thing he said that day was, he came, I'll go. Don't even stop him, let him go. Do you really think you're very talented? I'll tell you, anyone can turn around after the project leaves, but without the support of the company, it's not even bullshit. After the screams were over, the old rascal sat on the ground and almost hysterically roared at him. That clamoring expression was completely different from the humble demeanor of an interview on TV now. Afterwards, Jiang Zhou tried every means to reclaim what originally belonged to him. Commercial, legal, networking, and even seeking media exposure. But as a result, he didn't even reveal a single detail. Half of the 21st century has already passed, and now the influence of super enterprises is no longer as small as it was at the beginning of the century. Jiang Zhou had also thought about whether he was too emotional at the time, but he believed that if he had to go through that scene 100 times again, he would also make this choice. This road is impassable. Originally, he planned to start from scratch and complete the commercialization process of digital personality before the competitors of Olympus Group. However, the recent medical examination notice from the hospital extinguished his idea. Although he completely didn't believe the story told by the drunkard in front of him, the bartender still joked. Your story is very interesting, but if you are really the real person in charge of the Yanu's project, can you help me explain some issues? Then, without waiting for Jiang Zhou's agreement, he asked himself, if I really copy and upload my personality in the future, wouldn't it be that there will be two versions of me in both the computer and reality? Not only that. The personality data in the computer can be continuously copied and pasted, but who is the real me? Jiang Zhou took out his phone and glanced at the time, then placed it on the bar and said. Let me answer your second question first. Each digital personality uploaded to the Yanu's program will generate a unique key, and only one digital personality will be allowed to exist at the same time. Copying personality information is not allowed from the bottom of the Yanu's program. As for which one is the real you or the uploaded you? At this point, Jiang Zhou thought of the critically ill notice and couldn't help but laugh strangely. He, this is a problem that doesn't need to be complicated. Startled by the other party's eerie expression and tone, the bartender asked anxiously. Why? Do you think? Establishing a scan that can accurately measure the potential of each neuron in the brain is as harmless as doing CT. No, high-precision scanning is based on the premise of completely destroying your biological brain. After the scan is completed, your physical life begins to count down on a monthly basis. Wait, sir. You have nosebleeds. The bartender looked at the blood wriggling out of the other person's nose and said in some horror. Regarding this, Jiang Zhou skillfully took out a tissue and wiped his nose, then pointed to his head and said calmly. It's nothing, it's just the symptom of acute radiation sickness. In about a month's time, the things in my brain will become a bowl of spoiled bean curd jelly served with sauce soup, but there will always be some costs on the road of scientific progress, won't there? Are you saying? Although he was listening to the story, the bartender still took a cold breath. How do you think the Janus project progressed so quickly without data from live experiments? Jiang Zhou chuckled at himself and glanced back at the TV program behind him. Zhou Shuguang on TV is repeatedly reassuring the host that all experiments of the Janus project absolutely follow the standards of the Scientific Ethics Committee. Was it forced? No, it's voluntary. Jiang Zhou turned around and said calmly. The Janus project was his lifelong effort. It is he who has been persisting in this unpopular research direction, lobbying the board of directors to continue investing in the project, and tackling the key technical challenges. In the end, he voluntarily walked into the scanner as a mouse, risking his own life to personally verify the feasibility of the theory. He is not seeking death, but is confident in the feasibility of his theory. Even if his body dies, his soul can still stay in the storage card. But now, in order to win the honor of being the general manager of the Janus project, Zhou Shuguang eagerly announced the project progress to the world before the technology was mature. This will inevitably attract layers of obstacles from various forces. Although in the long run, Jiang Zhou firmly believes that the Janus project will be successful, after all, no one can refuse the temptation brought by immortality. However, the digital personality archives he has left behind will inevitably be completely destroyed under the pressure of the Science Ethics Committee in the turbulent period of the future. Not only glory, but also the eternal future has nothing to do with him. Since that's the case, then it's not surprising what he did. Jiang Zhou thought so, picked up his phone on the table, and clicked on a program with the icon double-headed god. Janus, the door god, looks towards the past with one face and the future with the other. Please enter your key. Underscore 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 underscore, a 16-digit random key used to activate one's digital personality that can only last for 3 days. So, the next step is the demonstration of Janus' current achievements. In the right 4 quantum computer brought by Professor Zhou, there is a brain scan modeling of a 10-year-old chimpanzee stored. Afterwards, the professor will activate it, and everyone will witness it on site on the program. On TV, the host is explaining the next interactive segment to the audience, while Zhou Shuguang and his assistants are hands-on connecting the computer to the 3D projection equipment on stage. Jiang Zhou looked at the input interface of the phone key, his finger hanging on the encryption keyboard. So, you were actually joking just now, right? The bartender next to him once again filled the empty classical glass, and his face regained its expression of disbelief. This cannot be blamed on him. If he firmly believes in the words of every drunk, then he should be the most legendary person in this world. Jiang Zhou didn't respond, just trying to make the fingers carrying his soul's destination no longer tremble. Seeing the other person remain silent for a while with a tense expression, the bartender pushed the glass filled with wine over. Stop frowning and have another drink. Perhaps this sentence disrupted Jiang Zhou's tangled balance. He took a deep breath, took a glass of wine, and drank it all in one breath. Then, with the stimulation of alcohol, I quickly and accurately entered the key, and then confirm activation. After finishing all of this, he collapsed on the bar counter as if drained of energy. Did you just send a message to someone? You'll find out later. Jiang Zhou said weakly. In fact, he himself did not know what would happen. He uploaded his digital personality activation, which could only maintain his memory for 3 days, to the internet. In the past, even if he lost his head, he did not dare to do so. There is no base construction that simulates the real physical environment, no other program that precisely simulates human senses and feedback, and no redundant intelligence filter that filters out excessive information. Even Jiang Zhou himself doesn't know whether his digital personality can truly achieve data immortality as planned at the beginning of the Janus project. As in the previous experiment, it quickly turned into an incomprehensible chaotic data. But no matter what, this is enough for him to announce to the world who the true creator of Janus is. His digital personality is now stored in the most advanced right for quantum computer that Zhou Shuguang is planning to launch. By utilizing the backdoor left by the past, one's digital personality will be covered at the moment when the other party starts, appearing on stage through 3D projection. Jiang Zhou has already synchronized a brief intelligence report, and at that time, his copy will announce to the world who is the true leader of the Janus project. Audience friends, the next moment is to witness history. A true ghost will appear on our stage through the most advanced technology today. On TV, accompanied by the host's passionate speech, Zhou Shuguang confidently pressed the start button in the center of the stage. In front of the TV, Jiang Zhou lifted his head and held his breath, staring intently at the screen. Aerosol curtains sprayed around the stage, and 24 3D projectors lit up simultaneously. However, nothing appeared in the center of the stage. On stage, Zhou Shuguang and the host looked at each other in confusion, and then the host quickly got into a round fight. "Sorry, there may have been some minor issues with the device, and our staff will." But before she could finish speaking, the 3D projectors around her suddenly moved. Accompanied by a sharp and strange sound of electric currents, a humanoid abyss composed of countless changing color blocks projected abruptly onto the center of the entire stage. Lucy. On stage, Zhou Shuguang looked at the figure for a moment and murmured with some confusion. The chimpanzee used for display was named Lucy, in commemoration. But he soon realized that it was definitely not a digital personality projection of chimpanzees. Because chimpanzees could never have such a large data throughput. The cooling system of the right 4 quantum computer had already begun to overload and smoke. The figure, composed of countless color blocks, raised its face and elegantly stretched its limbs. It didn't pay any attention to Zhou Shuguang, who was frantically trying to forcefully shut down the quantum computer while greeting its assistant behind it. Instead, it slowly walked to the nearest camera to it. In the midst of a sharp electric roar, the color block person opened their eyes. Not just the 2 color blocks on the 3D projection. Its gaze pierced through the camera lens and turned into a set of electrical signals, which, after being converted several times, turned into a beam of light, surging at a speed of 300,000 kilometers per second in the optical cable. A command passes through tens of thousands of information nodes and countless times transforms into elusive electromagnetic signals traveling between satellites and base stations. Searching for something through billions of sensor terminals worldwide. After an incredibly long few tenths of a second, the colorful humanoid gaze finally passed through the TV screen of a bar and reflected in Jiang Zhou's pupils. Found it. Next, it's time to say hello. Doodle doodle doodle. Jiang Zhou held his breath and looked at the colorful person on the TV when his phone rang. Caller. Janice on the phone call interface, the red button that should have been the hang-up option has now changed to another green connect button. This seems to be telling him that you have no right to refuse. Jiang Zhou didn't dare to pick it up for a while. It's not until you fall that you fly. So, the phone ringtone of the nearby bartender also rang. He turned his head and glanced at the phone in the bartender's hand. The caller also displays. Janice immediately after, as if the symphony had begun to play, everyone's mobile phones in the entire bar rang simultaneously. Everyone lowered their heads and took out their phones, with similar doubts on their faces. On every phone present, the same unfamiliar caller is displayed. Janice. Everyone is hesitating whether to answer or hang up, but in fact, this is not a question worth pondering. Because they will soon realize that they are both hanging up and unable to connect, and can only let the bell ring continuously. Amidst the constant ringing of bells, Jiang Zhou's previous drunkenness instantly dissipated for the most part. He felt the alcohol in his body turn into cold sweat and keep dripping down. If he were to run out at this moment, he would find that not only this bar, but also the surrounding stores, the streets outside, the squares outside. Centered around this bar, Janice's calls are spreading like ripples throughout the city without any signs of stopping. The other party is patiently waiting for someone to answer the phone. No matter how long it takes, no matter where the other party is going. At this moment, Jiang Zhou, surrounded by the bell, had a feeling that if he didn't answer the call, the bell would echo endlessly. He turned his head and glanced at the bartender next to him, who was staring at him with a frightened expression as if saying, "This is what you said before, you'll know later." Singularity. Thinking of something, Jiang Zhou murmured and answered the phone. At the moment he answered the phone, the whole city was filled with noise, and the noisy ringtones of his phones also quieted down. It was as silent as the moment when the conductor gently tapped the sheet music stand and held his breath while lifting his arm. "Hello." Jiang Zhou slowly spoke up, breaking the silence. For Jiang Zhou, it is unclear whether it was only a second or a whole century that passed, and a sound came to his ears from both the TV and his phone simultaneously. "Good evening." That voice was clear and gentle, sounding somewhat similar to the tone of one's own speech. "My creator." This is the last sentence that Jiang Zhou heard before losing consciousness. "No. 2. Your name." You are listening at novelfull.audio. Hey, you finally woke up. In a daze, Jiang Zhou heard someone talking to him. The person speaking seemed to have realized the fact that they were already clear-headed earlier than him. Jiang Zhou blinked and focused on his blurry vision. A burly man with strange metal bottle caps sat opposite him, staring at him with a caring expression. "I am." Jiang Zhou's consciousness was still stuck at the moment when he received a call from Yanus at the bar, and the sudden change in the surrounding scene caused his brain to crash. The bottle cap I sitting opposite him continued. "Sorry, little brother. We used to evade the pursuit of those company dogs in the warehouse of Theseus Freight, and we never expected that there were still people there. It was us who caused you to be arrested as a rebel. I will explain it to you later, but don't hold on to too much hope. For the rebels, those company dogs are always willing to kill by mistake rather than let go." When the other person said these words, their gaze dodged slightly, and their expression was full of embarrassment and guilt. Company dog. Rebels. What exactly is this bottle cap I saying? Wasn't he still in the bar before? Jiang Zhou looked around in confusion. Surrounding him was not the bar before he lost consciousness, but a narrow and technologically advanced carriage. The walls are covered with pitch-black matte paint, reminiscent of the electronic circuits of blood vessels spreading around, emitting alternating light and dark blood like breathing. There are about 40 or so people sitting on the seats on both sides of the carriage. No, it should be said that there are about 40 or so people imprisoned. The vast majority of them are sleeping with their heads down. Everyone's joints are firmly fixed in place by the black buckle-like restraints. At this moment, Jiang Zhou realized that he was also restrained. On the aisle in the middle of the carriage, several pitch-black flying machines resembling frisbees floated in mid-air, scanning each sleeping prisoner one by one with a light blue beam of light. Jiang Zhou noticed that those aircraft had neither spiral wings nor jet ports, and were quietly floating in mid-air in violation of the law of gravity. As if Newton's spirit in heaven was humbly supporting them. In the year 2069 on Earth where he lived, there was absolutely no such mystical technology. Is this a time travel? Jiang Zhou, who had a retro hobby of reading online novels during his student years, thought to himself, but then shook his head in his heart. Just now, the bottle cap I spoke standard Mandarin and also mentioned the word Theseus, with a clear historical origin. In other words, I must still be on Earth thinking of another absurd possibility. Jiang Zhou calmed down and turned to look at the bottle cap I and asked. Sorry big brother, my mind is not very clear now. Can you tell me when it is now? Which year, month, and day? My name is Black Falcon 136, and there shouldn't be anyone around here with the same genetic number as me. Just call me 136. Speaking of an obviously abnormal name, the burly man who claimed to be Black Falcon 136 smiled generously before answering. Today is March 5th. Well, it's March 5th in the 44th year of the lunar calendar. What is a new calendar? The question flashed through his mind, but he didn't ask it so directly. Exposing his ignorance of common sense immediately in a new environment is definitely a very dangerous thing. Just as Jiang Zhou was thinking about how to continue using Glitch AS, another voice beside him perfectly helped him solve his confusion. I really admire you. B6, how many times have I said that the indigenous people at the bottom of the resettlement area are accustomed to using the AD era? Hey! Neanderthals, this year is 2169 AD, how about it? Have you regained some clarity now? The speaker was a woman sitting on the left side of Black Falcon 136. She seemed to be the only person in the entire carriage who was still conscious except for the two of them. That woman is in her early 20s, and her hair color is very bold. It looks like all the paint needed to draw a Van Gogh sunflower can be found in her hair. On her left cheek, there is a slightly fluorescent ice blue butterfly that looks a bit like the popular fluorescent tattoo among young people. But when Jiang Zhou saw the butterfly waving its wings like a living creature, moving along the other person's cheek to the skin of the neck, and then disappearing into the skin below the collar, he could conclude that it was definitely not something as simple as a tattoo. But compared to tattoos that can move on the skin, what the other person said shocked him even more. In 2169 AD, have you arrived 100 years later? How's it going? The cave-dwelling person, have you regained some clarity in your mind? The woman asked again. Ah. Well, I'm much clearer now. Not at all. At this moment, Jiang Zhou only felt his mind buzzing. It's like someone put an iron bucket on him and then hit him hard with a baseball bat. Calm down first, taking 2 deep breaths in a row, Jiang Zhou thought to himself. If it were truly 100 years from now, then whether it was anti-gravity aircraft or tattoos that could move on the skin, it would not be a problem. Any advanced technology at first glance would be no different from magic. But the question is, how did you actually reach 100 years later? No need to say more. Only Janus, who seems to have uploaded his digital personality, has this suspicion. Recalling that mysterious phone call, Jiang Zhou felt a bit toothache. No matter how it was done, why did Janus send himself to 100 years later? Hey, caveman, if you're clear-headed, I have some good news to tell you here. The butterfly-tattooed woman's words once again brought Jiang Zhou's consciousness back to reality. The cave-dwelling person seems to be the other person's way of addressing oneself, and according to that tone, this word is probably similar to the derogatory term used by Jiang Zhou in his era to refer to a person of a certain skin color and race with the word ni, which has a racist connotation. It's better not to worry about how you came 100 years later, but to understand the current situation is the more important thing. Jiang Zhou turned his gaze to look at the woman. What good news? The woman looked at Jiang Zhou playfully and then said in a slightly gloating tone. Because you chose a good place to stay overnight, you have been arrested by the Pluto Deep Dive Company as a rebel organization called the Icarus Rebellion. We just bombed their intelligence control center in Nord's 7th placement area last week and burned their regional manager's brain. The newly assigned regional manager once took office spoke harshly, we must make these terrorists pay an unforgettable price for life. The current situation has been updated, and my luck is as good as ever. The first thing I do when I come into an unfamiliar era is to inexplicably take the blame. What would be the cost? Jiang Zhou, who was cursing inwardly, asked calmly on the surface. Good question. As a super enterprise that has only joined the Olympian order, in recent years, Pluto deep dive style of behavior is even less concerned about dignity compared to its senior colleagues. As far as I know, they have not yet signed the Biological Rights Protection Act. In other words, legally, because they have damaged the company's property, they will have absolute disposal power over our biological rights. According to their usual style of behavior, our entire vehicle would probably have our frontal lobes removed and then transformed into various types of zombie slaves according to their needs, working until their bodies were completely worn out to make up for their financial losses. The voice of the butterfly-tattooed woman spoke with a certain pleasure of pulling people into the water. At this moment, she can only convince herself to accept reality by confirming that there is someone worse off than herself. Olympian order. Upon hearing familiar terms, Jiang Zhou couldn't help but think of his old employer, Olympus Group. A global artificial intelligence giant that planned the Yanus project, and one of the earliest super enterprises in the 1960s. I don't know if this Olympian order has anything to do with my former employer. What kind of good news is this? Jiang Zhou, whose mood had completely sunk, asked after him. Upon hearing his words, the desperate and exaggerated smile on the butterfly-tattooed woman's face intensified. Isn't this worth celebrating? As a cave-dwelling person, you should have lived a meaningless life aimlessly, unable to figure out who made you live like a sewer mouse until you die. But now, as the Icarus Liberation Front rebel, you can proudly sacrifice for a better future for humanity and the great cause of overthrowing the Super Enterprise Alliance. This can bring the rarest idealistic brilliance of this era to your ignorant and tragic life, and you must be grateful. Before Jiang Zhou could find a suitable one to push back, Black Falcon 136 beside him spoke up. Qianxia Sakura, can't you just restrain your harshness a little bit? This little brother was completely innocent and implicated by us. Also, can we stop using the derogatory term, cave-dwelling man? Striving for the rightful rights of native humans is also one of the concepts created by Icarus. Why have you become so? His voice is not as warm as when he spoke to Jiang Zhou before. Do you want to ask me why I am so harsh? The woman named Qianxia Sakura refused to be outdone. She turned her head and stared at 136, losing control as if unable to control her intense emotions, saying, I can't figure out why I have to be so harsh. Maybe it's because my TM is about to have my frontal lobe cut off and stuff a bunch of whore's memories into my mind, being transformed into a sex toy for some pervert, maybe because I've always been a selfish bastard, joining Icarus just to make a living, unlike you, a saint with noble beliefs, who sees this outcome as martyrdom and accepts his fate with satisfaction. She became more and more excited as she spoke, and Jiang Zhou felt that if she hadn't been restrained, she would definitely be stepping on the chair and talking at this moment. I've always imagined myself as the Messiah, and now I can fulfill my mission of self-sacrifice, right? B6. Since you died without regret, could you please be a little kind to me? Just shut your mouth for a few minutes and let me, a vulgar mortal, find some less hurtful fun for myself before dying. Regarding this, Black Falcon 136 shook his head and answered with a sad expression. I never thought I would die without regret, Xia Ying. As long as there is still a breath left, I will never accept it as my own destiny. I cannot witness Icarus achieving his career and die, I will only feel regret. You damn thing, you know a few regrets. Jiang Zhou, who was watching the play with his mouth shut, was now intimidated by Qianxia Ying's sudden aggressive speech. To be honest, although the woman named Qianxia Sakura has a very punk hairstyle, her appearance still belongs to the cute category. Her clear and agile eyes, with a slightly chubby baby face, combined with her colorful hair, make her look like she has walked into reality from an animation. Not only that, although her previous remarks were harsh and sharp, her voice was soft and sticky that could not be concealed. And the sudden and aggressive speech from such a soft and sticky voice made Jiang Zhou feel a bit confused for a moment. However, the Black Falcon 136 on the side did not react much, and he calmly replied. Naturally adjusted individuals are born from the birth box, and indeed do not have a physical mother. However, this does not mean that I do not understand what regret is. Oh. Are you trying to explain that your mother, like your last destination, is a box used to hold you? So, only people like you who take selfies as family photos can see it. So please understand that I am different from you. I have a mother, a younger brother and a younger sister. My younger sister finally left the bottom resettlement area last month and went to a private secondary education center. Now that I may be transformed into a sexual partner, what should my family do? Tell me, how can my family survive? Qianxia Sakura looked at Black Falcon 136, her voice choking up at the end, and a few tears rolled down her face along with her words. She wanted to lift her hand to wipe, but the restraining device made it impossible for her to even lift her hand. 136 didn't speak. After a brief silence in the carriage, Qianxia Sakura suddenly apologized in a low voice. Sorry B6, I didn't mean to say you didn't have a mother, I just. 136 shook his head to indicate that he didn't care, and then he let out a long sigh. Both you and I are right. Ultimately, it is the fault of this world, but why has this world become so? Is it because the Olympus Order united all super enterprises, and UU reading www.uukangshu.net monopolized the interface of the Abyssal Web? Or is it because the Abyssal Web itself brings blessings and curses to humanity? Or should we blame those abyssal roamers who opened a new era, the builders who isolated the old web, and the super artificial intelligence Janus who twisted the old web into the Abyssal Web? Upon hearing the familiar name Janus, Jiang Zhou quietly perked up his ears. Qianxia Sakura took the sentence with a strong nasal tone. If we go back to the source, it's TM's fault that the first deep diver, who released Janus to the internet. What's the name of that damn thing? Jiang Zhou. Black Falcon answered, and he continued by adding. But I think it is a historical necessity. If it is not him, as long as the human beings at that time did not realize the danger of digital personality technology, someone will upload digital personality to the internet sooner or later. The result is just that the first deep diver changed his personality. That won't change the fact that that dog thing should be cut to pieces. TMs, the thing that should be publicly tried by all humanity after the Great Impact ended, actually disappeared in history, with no one alive or dead. Qianxia Sakura said fiercely. Hating an ancient person who may have died 100 years ago, in the eyes of Black Falcon 136, is a way of venting emotions that no one will complain about, so he didn't say much. He turned his head and looked at the innocent native person who had been swept in not far away, and his voice regained its previous warmth. By the way, little brother, I forgot to ask, what is your name? Anyway, it's not called Jiangzhou. Jiang Zhou, whose back was covered in cold sweat, thought to himself. No. 3. Abyssal Dark Web. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Is that so? Because of the impact on the head, I can't even remember my own name. Black Falcon nodded and naturally accepted the nonsense made up by Jiang Zhou. Perhaps in the other person's subconscious, compared to indirectly killing an innocent person who needs to bear the pain of parting with family and friends, a person who even forgets who they are can reduce some of their sense of guilt. But for Jiang Zhou, being able to get by like this was a slight relief for him. He did not choose to fabricate a pseudonym temporarily. Firstly, he did not know the form of identity authentication in this era, and making up a name blindly could easily lead to problems. Secondly, when it comes to Kana, he cannot have a reflexive reaction like his real name. This can easily reveal flaws in the eyes of observant people. Therefore, he simply pretended to have completely lost his memory without stopping, and took this opportunity to inquire about what had happened in the past 100 years. 100 years ago, because of the negligence of Jiang Zhou, the first deep diver, the entire human internet was hijacked by the super artificial intelligence who called himself Janus, and suffered the disaster which was called Great Impact by later generations. Janus, who obtained free will, kept multiplying himself, intended to use his network authority to destroy his own human creator and become the new master of the world. At the critical moment, governments of various countries united and adopted a crazy plan of defeating artificial intelligence with a single gamble. They produced several super artificial intelligence with the same principle, released them into the internet, fought with Janus to the boundary of network signals, and even the server burned out in the end. Those newly emerged super artificial intelligence completely destroyed the source code of Janus with a numerical advantage. After the dust of domain warfare settled, those remaining super artificial intelligence were also eliminated by humans through pre-left backdoors. Humanity has regained its original position. However, after the Big Shock ended, the entire internet has been deeply polluted. The network relics that experienced the Battle of Gods are full of countless malicious programs that may lead to disastrous consequences, and also contain countless technological fragments that can subvert the current human scientific cognition. The proliferation of uncontrollable technologies triggered several crises in the following decades that were no less than major shocks, leading to the strong rise of super enterprises and the gradual disappearance of the national political system. Finally, in order to prevent the legacy of artificial intelligence in the internet from being used to destroy mankind itself, and to completely monopolize the business of salvaging the hidden network technology, several super enterprises jointly built a firewall called Styx. This great project isolated the unpolluted areas of the human internet and became the World Wide Web today, accounting for about 4% of the scale of the old network. And the remaining 96% of the dangerous areas are known as the Abyss Dark Web, which contains countless wandering malicious programs as well as valuable remnants of super artificial intelligence technology, with countless opportunities and risks coexisting. To this day, there are still countless lunatics who want to make a name for themselves, risking their lives to cross the Styx firewall and infiltrate the abyss of the dark web, trying to salvage technologies beyond the current human understanding. Until 44 years ago, the third corporate war over Abyss Dark Web resources came to an end, and the Olympus order was established. The 12 largest super enterprises in the world have ultimately defined their respective spheres of influence. They collectively control more than 90% of the secure access points of the Abyss Dark Network, thereby thoroughly mastering the resources of the Abyss Dark Network and establishing their eternal technological advantages. Pluto Deep Dive Company is a super enterprise specializing in the salvage business of Abyss Dark Web technology. A few years ago, they discovered a brand new alpha-level dark network access port. With this interface, this company joined the Olympus Order, becoming the second super enterprise to join the Olympus Order in the new era after the Bacchus Order. The rapidly moving train was as quiet as standing still in place, and along the way, Black Falcon 136 patiently shared history with Jiang Zhou. It is difficult to describe Jiang Zhou's mood after hearing all of this with a specific emotion. 100 years ago. Or for his feelings, less than 10 minutes ago, his impulsive decision had such a huge impact on the entire world. If a butterfly flapping its wings could trigger a storm on the other side of the ocean, then my behavior at that time was probably blowing fiercely towards the coastline with a blower. Even as 136 said, even if he did not upload his digital personality to the internet, as long as people could not find the potential danger of digital personality technology, sooner or later others would do so. But thinking so does not make him accept everything with ease. The super artificial intelligence, based on one's own electronic personality, has stirred up the entire world, and it was personally uploaded by oneself. In the eyes of others, at the very least, one should apologize with death. Of course, despite being heavy, he did not have the idea of apologizing to death. Firstly, Jiang Zhou couldn't feel any sense of reality about the fact that his digital personality had caused such a big mess. Secondly, he also did not believe in the historical truth of the past 100 years, which was as simple as 136 said. At least there were too many doubts about the fact that he had traveled 100 years later. Of course, there is a more important and simple reason. He doesn't want to die. However, it doesn't depend on his thoughts at the moment. Brother 136, can you explain my situation clearly to the people of Pluto Deep Dive Company? It's just that I have nothing to do with you, just happened to pass by the Theseus warehouse. After a moment of silence, Jiang Zhou awkwardly brought up this matter again. Although he didn't know what kind of mystical technology it was to transform into a so-called zombie slave worker. But as a researcher in cognitive science, he is too clear about the consequences of having the prefrontal lobe removed from the brain. Becoming a dementia with dull eyes and drooling corners of the mouth can be considered a more benevolent outcome. As for Jiang Zhou's anxious inquiry from the bottom of his heart, Black Falcon 136 could only comfort him with a bitter smile. Little brother, don't worry, I will definitely try to explain it clearly to them. When he said this, he himself hesitated. The more seriously you explain, the less likely the other party is to let him go. Instead, they will feel that he is an important role in the organization. Do you really consider those company dogs to be fools? Xianxia Sakura, who had not spoken before, suddenly spoke up. Her voice no longer sounded as harsh as before, but rather had a sense of resignation and powerlessness. Even if those company dogs really believe that he's just a bystander who got involved innocently, considering the cost and risk of putting him back, it's better to make the mistake and treat him like Icarus rebel army together. B6, in the Nord resettlement area, a cave-dwelling person's life is not worth a few dollars. After speaking, she turned her gaze to Jiang Zhou, and the ice-blue butterfly tattoo flew back onto her cheek. So, accept your fate, unlucky guy, be careful in your next life. It was at this moment that the carriage, which had been driving quietly, stopped without warning. We have arrived at the station. Number 4. Death penalty and death sentence with a reprieve. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Karen number 7 has been successfully connected. Passengers are advised not to walk inside the carriage as the air pressure inside and outside the cabin is being balanced. The formulaic voice broadcast sounded, and the tightly closed door in front of the carriage slowly opened with a hiss. Welcome to Tartaros. On behalf of Pluto Deep Dive Company Reception Center, I wish you a pleasant day. Pluto, the god of the underworld in Roman mythology, Tartaros, the underworld in Greek-Roman mythology. In other words, they were probably taken to the headquarters of Pluto Deep Dive Company. Jiang Zhou thought so, and his body stood up involuntarily. Not only him, but also about 40 people in the entire carriage, including the prisoners who were still asleep, stood up neatly and were controlled to queue up on the aisle of the carriage. The thing that imprisons them is not just a restraint, but also a power exoskeleton that can control their movements. A few seconds later, accompanied by the chaotic footsteps, several people pushed the door against the light and entered the carriage. Are these people the only ones? The person in charge scanned for a week and asked casually. That was a blond man wearing a pitch-black long windbreaker, his expression revealing the arrogance unique to middle-level managers. Behind him, a female adjutant with sharp short hair looked at the data board in her hand and replied. That's right, Director Yi. They are all members of the Icarus organization, and according to the plan, they will be sent to the medical department for frontal lobe pre-processing, and then. Medical department, where is Percy Fanny? Yes. The man, known as Director Yi, let out a tisk, and then waved his hand, saying. Select 10 Depth 2 adjustment personnel and send them to the 3rd deep diving warehouse. The short-haired woman was taken aback by the command and then said with a puzzled expression. That's not good, Director Yi. Just take away 10 of them, all of whom are Depth 2 adjustment personnel. Minister Fanny's side already lacks skilled workers, and I can't explain it here. I will write a report with them, and Fanny won't dare to have any objections. The tone of the other party is not negotiable. At this point of speaking, the short-haired female adjutant could only nod her head with regret. She pressed the data board in her hand, and a flying machine named Newton's Psi in Jiang Zhou's heart hovered in front of her, projecting a light blue projection interface. Black Falcon .136, Depth Adjustment, Depth 2, Mental Index. 0.95, Possessing Modification Permissions. Owl 3 Tactical Goggles, Crocodile-Level Subcutaneous Armor, Racing 2 Adrenal Drug Pump, Edge Enhancement System, Tau Steel Claw Blade. She looked at the scanned data and read. This one is fine, next one. Director Yi nodded, signaling to continue. Qianxia Sakura, Depth Adjustment, Depth 2, Mental Index. 0.97, Modification Permission Held, Fantasy 4 Self.Awareness Nano Inkjet, Life Support Module. Winter. Sure, next one. What are they doing? Jiang Zhou turned his head to look at 136 and asked in a low voice. The latter shook his head, indicating that he was also unclear. Meanwhile, Qianxia Sakura rolled her eyes and whispered, B6, are you just trying to make yourself look taller? Didn't you even notice that? That senior company dog surnamed Yi plans to pick a group of people from us to help him mine. Mining? Jiang Zhou asked curiously. In his era, the term mining was often used to describe decentralized blockchain financial activities in addition to its literal meaning. You can also say gambling, the difference is not very big. It's about forcing the company to become a miner in the Abyss Dark Web, helping them salvage the technology left over from past AI. Pluto Deep Dive started with this. Qianxia Sakura explained. Is it dangerous? Jiang Zhou asked a question that he even thought was foolish. I heard that people who are caught by the company to work hard in mining can only survive for an average of 3 months as consumables. Jiang Zhou nodded at the words. That's a bit similar, but they are mining cards. In addition, Jiang Zhou noticed that Qianxia Sakura's emotions improved significantly when she spoke. There is undoubtedly a significant difference between the death penalty and the death sentence with a reprieve. I can't do things for the company dog. Upon hearing this, Black Falcon 130's face turned black, and he said firmly. Regarding this, Qianxia Sakura immediately advised. As you said before, as long as there is still a breath, you will never accept death as your own destiny. Since that's the case, let's live first. Her tone of voice was like persuading the bishop to falsely convert believers. The meaning of a breath still alive is definitely not. 136 wanted to explain, but Qianxia Sakura lowered her voice and interrupted. Besides, don't you even know how to fish? Catching fish. 136 is somewhat confused. We can pretend to cooperate and then become the company's pests, eating them down from within. Wasting the company's resources is also a form of resistance. Besides, being transformed into zombie slave workers is also a form of oppression. At least we still have the freedom to fish in mining. Qianxia Sakura explained it seriously. This girl is definitely deceiving honest people. Jiang Zhou beside thought to himself. Although he came from 100 years ago, he knew with his toes that if the other party dared to let the rebels of the company do things for him, there were ways to make them obedient. Even companies in their own era have various employee incentive mechanisms to prevent slacking off. How could those capitalists in 100 years have no means? However, it seems that Black Falcon 136 really has a bit of faith. After hesitating for a few seconds, he looked at Jiang Zhou and said. If that's the case, what should this native little brother do? That person surnamed Yi just said that he just needs to adjust people. So. As Qianxiang spoke, she turned her head to look at Jiang Zhou, with a face that showed the kind of apology that survivors have for those who are about to die. Jiang Zhou felt his heart sink. As Qianxia Sakura said, explaining to the company that she is not a member of the so-called Icarus resistance army will only have the opposite effect. Even if she can really persuade them, it is unlikely that the other party will let her go. After all, it's better to have one less thing than one more thing. It would be more convenient to deal with him as a 3-no man and those rebels together. But right now, is there any other way he can save himself? Feeling anxious, Jiang Zhou quickly thought about ways to get out of trouble. Even if it's like 136 and Qianxia Sakura, it's okay to change their death penalty to a death sentence with a reprieve. A possibility flashed through his mind, and Jiang Zhou keenly grasped it. Adventure, but worth a try. Thinking of this, he turned his gaze back to the few Pluto employees not far away. This is also acceptable, let's include it. So, which one is it? The man known as Director Yi asked casually. The 9th one. But Director Yi, there are no more depth 2 adjustment personnel in the prisoner. The short-haired female adjutant lifted her head and said. Just 9 adjustment personnel with a depth of 2 or more. This level of armed forces can also cause chaos in the Nord resettlement area. Director Yi shook his head and continued. Then find a depth 1 adjuster with a high mental index to make do with it. In that case, it's best to choose me. A loud voice interrupted the short-haired adjutant's words, and everyone's gaze turned to the source of the voice. The speaker was Jiang Zhou, who had made up his mind. He paused for a second in front of everyone's eyes before continuing. Compared to the depth 1 adjuster, it's better for you to choose me. Although he said that, in fact, he doesn't even know what depth 1 and adjustment person are. Yi Qian's mood is very bad at the moment. Due to the recent failure of his subordinates in the Nord resettlement area, it seems that anyone can step on Tartaros now. Perth Fanny, that despicable person from the medical department, was able to openly stumbling on herself. My deputy dares to openly question my decision. Even a lowly caveman who was captured now dares to speak loudly in front of him. You. Looking up and down at the cave-dwelling person with no signs of adjustment on his body, Yi Qian suddenly developed some mischievous interest in playing with mice. Tell me why. He asked calmly. But before the cave-dwelling person could speak, the deputy beside him hurriedly explained. Director Yi, the scan shows that no information about this person was found in the birth registration of Nord's resettlement area. He is likely just a black door at the bottom of the resettlement area. He is a native person and doesn't even have a brain-computer interface, so it's impossible for this person to. Please shut up. Yi Qian looked at the latter with a gentle smile and whispered, this is the second time you've interrupted me today. There won't be a third chance. The short-haired adjutant clearly saw this meaning in the eyes of his superiors. Her face instantly turned pale, and she dared not even say words like understand or sorry. She lowered her head and stepped aside. Yi Qian waved and restrained the power exoskeleton of the cave-dwelling person, controlling them to walk in front of him. Tell me why. He looked at the cave-dwelling man and asked again with a smile on his face. And the person looked straight into their eyes and threw a slightly absurd answer. Because I'm about to die. No. 5. Mandala. You are listening at novelfull.audio. He doesn't need to be sent for frontal lobe pre-processing, nor does he need to be sent as a miner in the Abyss Dark Web. Jiang Zhou was originally a dying person. As early as 100 years ago, he had already been sentenced to death with a reprieve. In order to verify the feasibility of the Yanus program, Jiang Zhou voluntarily underwent scanning with a high-precision scanner, which caused irreversible damage to his brain. Just before, he thought that his radiation sickness should have been smoothed out by the mysterious existence that brought him 100 years later, just like the drunkenness he had in the bar before. But after he recovered from the shock, the familiar feeling of dizziness and nausea came back. These symptoms showed that his brain cells would still gradually apoptosis in the next month, eventually becoming a bowl of spoiled bean curd jelly served with sauce soup. This should have been bad news. But now it has become his bargaining chip. The blond man known as Director Yi did not change his expression after listening to Jiang Zhou's words. Oh. I have been exposed to high doses of radiation before, and I can only live for a month at most. Jiang Zhou tried his best to keep his tone calm when speaking. So what? The other party's answer didn't seem very unexpected, and they didn't even ask why he was exposed to radiation, as if it was a normal thing in their era. So, transforming me into an unconscious slave worker now is an extremely wasteful behavior. Jiang Zhou replied. Although he is not sure what technology is required to transform into an unconscious slave worker, from the perspective of still needing to remove the frontal lobe as a pre-processing, at least zombie slave workers still need their brains to function properly. Slave workers with a shelf life of only 1 month. In the past, plantation owners in North America would not engage in such transactions. The other party didn't respond, so he continued. In other words, sending me to the Abyss Dark Web for mining would be a more cost-effective option. This would allow me to maximize the benefits of my life and at least not cause too much waste. According to Qianxiang, people who are forced by the company to work in mining for an average of only 3 months. In other words, even if one can still live for a month, the benefits they can generate are much higher than being a zombie slave worker. From the brief conversation between 136 and Qianxia Sakura earlier, he could roughly feel that although the Enterprise in the next 100 years has a more high-tech exterior compared to his own era, its essence is still the same, even the greed that emerged from the blue. For such utilitarians, it is meaningless to expect them to have a conscience, only by analyzing their actual gains and losses can it be useful. Yi Qian did not continue to ask questions, but turned his head to look at the adjutant beside him. The latter immediately understood and clicked on the data board in his hand a few times. The Newton Psi aircraft hovering in front of her immediately began to move and floated in front of Jiang Zhou. Then, a light blue beam swept back and forth over his body. He didn't lie, he had abnormal levels of repair enzymes in multiple organs, especially in the brain, which matched the symptoms of acute radiation sickness. If left untreated, he would have at most 38 days left. The deputy lifted his head from the data board and said. Yi Qian nodded and then looked at Jiang Zhou. So, at most in 30.8 days, you will still die. It's not in a questioning tone, he's more like giving the other party some notice. That's better than cutting off the frontal lobe now and immediately being transformed into a zombie without self-awareness. Jiang Zhou immediately answered. After he finished speaking, the other person seemed to be amused, and the hypocritical and stiff smile on their face gradually became vivid. Ha ha ha. It's a bit interesting. I don't know which nerve Yi Qian was touched by these words. He turned his head to look at his deputy and laughed, saying. This is a bit interesting. A cave-dwelling person without any modifications would voluntarily request to dive into the Abyss Dark Web. Check it out, is this really a low-tech tribe member from the bottom of the settlement area? Isn't it something important in Icarus? And for this question, the adjutant shook his head. In the database of the Nord Resettlement Area government, there is no personal information about this person. He has not even installed a brain-computer interface. 100% is a low-tech tribe at the bottom of the resettlement area. When she said this, she was actually subtly indicating that the other person was not suitable. However, Yi Qian doesn't seem to care about this small issue. After all, compared to the investment of transforming into a technical slave, installing a brain-computer interface in this era is already standard and almost cost-effective. He stared at Jiang Zhou and asked, "What's your name?" I've forgotten, maybe I don't have a name. Jiang Zhou replied with a tense expression on his face. Well, I remember you and those members of Icarus were caught together in the warehouse of Theseus Freight, right? So for the rest of the time in Tartaros, you can call yourself Theseus. Inexplicably, the other party gave themselves a code name and then turned to look at the adjutant behind them, saying. Take this cave-dwelling person to install the brain-computer interface, complete the authentication of the JZ network protocol, and then take him to the third deep-diving warehouse together. At this point, he paused for a moment and a mischievous smile appeared on his face. Table light area, depth 2. After speaking, he walked over and patted Jiang Zhou's shoulder, saying, "A low-tech person voluntarily applied to the Abyss Dark Web, which is great, Theseus. I really appreciate it, work hard, don't let me down." The short-haired adjutant beside him couldn't help but twitch his eyelids when he heard his superior refer to this cave-dwelling person as Theseus. But in the end, she didn't dare to say much on this topic, but cautiously asked, "So Director Yi, are you selecting these 10 people, including Theseus? This is the defective product that I helped Fanny pick out, and she will have to thank me afterwards. So this can only be considered as a bonus. You can also include the one you planned to pick out before and make up 11. After speaking, he walked away without looking back. JZ Network Protocol. Jiang Zhou heard another familiar term. "I'm not just familiar with it, that thing was developed by my own team. That is the network protocol specially designed by him for the uniqueness of the soul during the development process of the Yanus project. The protocol ensures that everyone will never be maliciously copied after uploading their digital personality, ensuring a unique ethical bottom line for each soul. So, take him for certification." So he was already certified 100 years ago. About 12 hours later, Jiang Zhou was restrained by his power exoskeleton and followed behind the short-haired adjutant. Along the way, he always wanted to touch the occipital position behind his head. There was just an opening there, big enough to put your index finger in. But he couldn't do it because the power exoskeleton was still restraining him. Brain-computer interface. Having experienced what had happened before, Jiang Zhou felt a bit speechless. The surgery to install the brain-computer interface only took 10 minutes. The efficiency of the surgical robotic arm was astonishing, and he didn't even realize what had happened before everything was over. And for the remaining 10 or so hours, he lay on the bed, waiting for some kind of injection into his brain, spreading and spreading like a virus inside his skull, ultimately forming a nanogrid that covered the entire brain. Countless terrifying hallucinations and auditory hallucinations appeared during this period, and several times he thought he was going to explain it here, between what seemed like a dream and what was not. Jiang Zhou speculates that this artificial neural network will collaborate with the entire brain to deceive the senses and allow himself to roam in the virtual world. This was a research direction of immersive virtual reality technology back then, but it was not possible to achieve it due to outdated basic technology. It seems that this technology has now become the infrastructure of this era. Jiang Zhou noticed that everyone he saw along the way had such an interface on the back of his head. "You shouldn't have asked to go to the deep-diving warehouse before." Halfway through, the short-haired female adjutant suddenly said this without hesitation. "Why?" Jiang Zhou asked back. At this moment, the two of them were walking in a layout that resembled an underground passage, with a pitch-black tone all the way. The electronic circuits in the previous carriage, which were like blood vessels, were also spreading around, contracting and relaxing like breathing. The adjutant turned his head and glanced at Jiang Zhou, pursed his lips as if he wanted to say something, but in the end he restrained himself. It wasn't until they arrived at a door emitting a slight chill that she spoke up. "Originally, you were just dying. I thought this was already bad enough." Jiang Zhou answered. The other party shook their head. "This is Tartaros. Death is never the end." After speaking, the cold door opened. Considering what the other party had said earlier, Jiang Zhou originally thought he would see a bunch of brains soaked in the incubator behind the door. But inside is just a neatly arranged array of pitch-black cubes. Each cube is approximately the size of 2 double-door refrigerators and has no distinctive appearance. Countless pipelines extend from above and eventually converge into a pipe that emits cold air. Most of the cold in the room comes from that pipe. This is probably what Director Yi previously referred to as the number 3 deep dive warehouse. The adjutant walked up to the nearest black cube and pressed something. The cube slowly opened, and inside was enough space for one person to sit. The inner wall of the cabin is a geometric structure resembling a honeycomb, with interfaces everywhere inside. Deep dive sub-warehouse, there are things inside that can maintain all your vital signs and needs. She paused before speaking the lines that were roughly in the standard process. From now on, this deep-diving sub-warehouse will replace the power exoskeleton and become your new prison. Jiang Zhou suspected that this sentence was also a voice command, because the restraint device on his body automatically loosened after the other party finished speaking this sentence. Take off your clothes and sit inside, then set up your mandala. She pointed to the cockpit and said. What is mine? Jiang Zhou moved his slightly stiff joints and asked. Your mandala, the third-generation JZ network verification system. The visual cortex signal perception switch activates your brain-computer interface by imagining a real graphic. In short, just follow the instructions and you can do it for a 5-year-old child. She patiently explained. Anyway, Jiang Zhou has no capital to refuse. After moving his stiff joints, he calmly took off his clothes and lay down in the cockpit. The cabin door closed, and some odorless gas brushed over his face, causing him to instantly lose his perception of his body, and his vision changed from an endless darkness to a void. This scene is like what I've heard before, and many people's descriptions of themselves dying are mediocre then, with a click, something inserted into the interface of his occipital bone, as if electrified, and he felt his spirit become incredibly clear. A distinctive sound echoed in Jiang Zhou's ear. A black regular script also appeared in his sight. The content is as follows. Detected users who have not included interface feature codes. If it is your first time accessing, please set your mandala. If you want to change the interface, please activate the existing mandala first. Jiang Zhou, who had lost his perception of the body below his neck, clicked on the option of First Visit through the eye tracking operating system. Please imagine a mandala that is closely related to you, unforgettable, easy to imagine, and unique, as your own based on this prompt, combined with the meaning of the short-haired woman before, Jiang Zhou suddenly realized. So in this era, people's verification passwords for accessing the internet are all visualized in their own minds as a unique graphic. Then there's really no way to steal accounts. Even if one tells others their mandala, there will always be subtle differences in details when different people imagine the same shape. Especially if one sets their mandala as something in memory, it is almost impossible for others to stimulate the same imagination. Jiang Zhou thought of this and immediately began to think about what kind of shape he should choose as his mandala. Almost subconsciously, the scene of himself entering a key to activate his digital personality in that bar 100 years ago came to his mind. Yu reading www.uukangshu.net. Do you want to give it a try? Jiang Zhou tried to swallow saliva that did not exist. If this verification system really iterates from the JZ network protocol created by oneself and is backward compatible, then as long as one inputs that string of 16 key, they can activate their past digital personality account. In other words, I might be able to activate Yanuza's account. If he still exists. But should I take this risk? At this moment, he is at the headquarters of a super enterprise. If his identity were to be exposed here, he wouldn't dare to think about what would happen. He quickly made a decision. Whatever. Even if there's no response, there's nothing wrong with using that 16-bit key as a mandala. Jiang Zhou didn't hesitate for too long. After all, there were only more than 30 days left to live. Give it a try, no matter how bad it is, where can it go? Moreover, if it were really Janus who sent himself 100 years later, then the other party would not have left some clues for him. Having figured this out, Jiang Zhou slowly outlined the 16 key in standard font in his imagination. When he finished sketching the last symbol, a change occurred. The void in front of me was shattered into countless blocks of color. Accompanied by the howling of electric current, those color blocks quickly turned into rotating eddies, eventually converging into a constantly changing human shape. Jiang Zhou knows this thing. The humanoid abyss that once looked at him through the TV. The voice that once referred to itself as the creator. The existence that once claimed to be Janus. No. 6. Another section of life. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Surrounded by a void of nothingness, it is like a concrete representation of the concept of infinity. And the human figure, pieced together by countless ever-changing color blocks, emerged in this void like a deity towering above infinity. Just looking at it, Jiang Zhou felt his non-existent hair stand up. Hello. He suppressed his inner unease and tentatively greeted him. There was no response from the other party. What exactly are you? Jiang Zhou continued to ask. There was still no response, as if the other person couldn't hear him speaking. Is it that this guy is currently initializing and still needs loading time? Looking at this abstract human figure with countless color blocks constantly changing, Jiang Zhou thought in confusion. After hesitating for a moment, he used the eye tracking system to access the menu interface stored in the upper left corner of his field of view. After selecting Generate a Double, a slightly slimmer body quickly outlined in the void, carrying the consciousness of Jiang Zhou. Another program, abbreviated as a program, creates a movable physical body in the virtual cyberspace by scanning the user's real body. In the development phase of the Janus project, this was an operation interface built to enable the uploaded digital personality to communicate and interact with the outside world. Nowadays, this technology seems to be used as an interaction between computers and the brain. Jiang Zhou lowered his head and looked at the hand that was being outlined. Compared to the rough development version back then, the realism and smoothness of the stunt modeling are now at least 10 times stronger. However, this was also expected by Jiang Zhou. If he couldn't achieve this level after 100 years, he would really doubt whether the technology of human civilization had been locked down by some extraterrestrial civilization. Trying to grip it, Jiang Zhou didn't feel any delay or blockage, as if it was his original hand. Nodding, he controlled the stunt double and walked up to the person with the color block, slowly extending his hand towards the other person's face. Perhaps touching it with a double will have a reaction. He thought to himself. It was also at this moment that the other party had some movement. It was as if someone had pulled out a few frames, and Janus's movements suddenly changed. It slightly bent down, one hand covering its thigh, and the countless tiny blocks of color that made up it trembled rapidly. Hiss. Sizzle. I don't know. Janus emitted intermittent sounds as if severely disturbed. Seeing such a eerie scene, Jiang Zhou's outstretched hand stopped in mid-air. He asked cautiously. What don't you know? Will. Hiss. Z. Die in. Z. This. The increasingly intense electric current howled out one after another, until the piercing sound reached an unbearable peak, as if the radio had finally adjusted the signal. The color blocks that made up Janus suddenly stopped trembling. All the color blocks were pieced together like a jigsaw puzzle, and then became seamlessly integrated as if they had been lightly stroked by an invisible hand. During several breaths, the Janus rapidly transformed into a young man in his early 20s. Handsome and very familiar, but Jiang Zhou swore that he didn't know him. You. I don't know if he heard Jiang Zhou's words, but the person slowly looked up at him. This time, it said in an incredibly clear voice. I won't die here. After speaking, its hands rushed towards Jiang Zhou's arm like lightning. I won't die here. Z-bang. Gunshots rang out and the other person fell to the ground in response. The old snake looked at the young man lying on his back and was momentarily stunned. He didn't want to kill anyone. After entering the room, he first fired a shot at the other person's thigh, cutting off their attempt to escape. Later, he pointed the gun at the other person's head and slowly explained his intentions. In general, the commission ends here. Everyone is just doing this to make a living, and there is no need to risk their lives when there is a way to make a living. But this time, the old snake made a mistake. The other party was not scared by him at all, but endured the sharp pain in their thighs and warmly greeted all of his female family members. After the old snake began using death as a threat, the other party shouted, "I won't die here," and rushed forward, trying to take the gun from his hand. He almost instinctively pulled the trigger. The light blue pulse beam hit the guy's head, causing him to fall on his back. "It's already dead," the old snake thought to himself. Even though he hasn't confirmed the other person's vital signs in the past, being shot so hard in the head is unlikely to survive unless it's a specially reinforced adjuster. Are the people of Icarus so tiger-like this? Looking at the body of that guy, the old snake took a fierce blow at the nicotine nebulizer. He swore that he didn't want to kill anyone. He has been working as a street mercenary for almost 5 years, and he rarely does wet work. In these 5 years, there have been fewer than 2 deaths in his hands. The commission he received this time was just to ask this kid to hand over a memory. He won't take the other person's life. He can't figure out why this guy's reaction is so intense. Or is it true that people on the Icarus Liberation Front do not care about money or life? Everyone is like fanatical religious believers or loyal fans of virtual idols. Taking 2 more puffs at the atomizer, the old snake walked up to the corpse and crouched down, reaching out to touch the memory slot on the other person's neck. "If I had a son myself, wouldn't I be as old as him?" The old snake suddenly thought of it out of nowhere. Staring intently at the young man's eyes that he couldn't close his eyes, he suddenly felt a bit taboo, so he used his free hand to help him cover his eyelids. "Little one, you rushed over to grab the gun yourself. Don't blame me, don't come looking for me even if you become a ghost," he whispered to the dead person. I don't know if the other person heard his words, but the dead man's eyelids struggled to open again. The person who should have died turned his head to look at him in the frightened gaze of the old snake. "Sleeping slot. Sleeping slot." Then, both of them let out a startled cry as if they had seen a ghost. Yanuza's outstretched hand pierced through Jiang Zhou's temporary substitute like a ghost. At the moment of contact between the two, Jiang Zhou felt a massive amount of information being forced into his mind, which plunged him into a clear and absurd dream. In that moment, he seemed to have lived a broken and regretful life. "My name is Liao Qi. I was born on the bottom floor of the Dark Nord settlement and had not seen the real sky before the age of 12. My father used to be a worker at the Nord sewage treatment plant, while my mother made a living by reselling mimetic films. When I was young, due to the bankruptcy and restructuring of the resettlement area government, the Nord sewage treatment plant was contracted to a company. My father was dismissed due to the low level of rehabilitation, and he lost his free hand for labor because he couldn't afford to repay the GD loan. Although his native arm is still stored in the biobank, the cost of reconnecting the surgery is an astronomical figure for our family. Helpless and forced, his father found an unlicensed veterinarian to help connect his natural arm, and he eventually died of surgical infection due to that quack doctor. A few years after my father's death, my mother also went crazy. Nowadays, she is immersed in mimetic movies all day long, imagining herself as the glamorous but fateful young lady in the movies. Now she no longer recognizes who I am, even forgetting her own name. To be frank, my mother goes crazy, mostly because of me. After her father's death, she worked day and night, using her meager income to support me in attending the talent incubation center established by Pluto Deep Dive Company. She hoped that I could stand out from it and be recognized as an intern by the company's discerning eyes. In the future, she would become a dignified formal employee and a well-known figure in everyone's mouths. As God knows, I tried my best, but perhaps it was because I was born with no talent for learning, or maybe it was because I stayed up late and read for a week, and what I wrote down was not as much as what someone else would write down by plugging in advanced memory and taking a nap. In short, I have failed time and time again. But my mother, on the other hand, repeatedly transferred the money to my account, urging me to continue working hard. "It's okay, just try to land next time. Every time she fails, she will squeeze out a smiling face to comfort me or herself. As long as you come ashore, our life will become better. I realized early on that my mother was actually doing useless work, but when I realized that this untouchable hope was the only support for her survival, it was too late. After I told her that I would never go to the talent incubation center again, and I hated that place, she went crazy. In the days to come, in order to support myself and my crazy mother, I started making a living on the streets. In the streets where wildness and advancement intertwine, I am far more adept than in the ivory tower of a talent incubation center. Stealing parts, engaging in fraud, stealing data, moving corpses. In the lower levels of resettlement areas where the government outsources all public services, it is even difficult to find a few non-illegal jobs. I should have lived my life in such a daze, dying in an unknown sewage pit before the age of 40. All the implants on my body were dismantled by scavengers, and I didn't know how to resist this absurd world until I died. But by chance, I joined the Icarus Liberation Front. And there, I welcomed my second rebirth. I have a new home, one that is not linked by blood, but based on a warm family with shared beliefs. I also have a family again, many like-minded partners who are willing to sacrifice their lives to resist the company's order. As a volunteer of the Icarus Liberation Front, the past 6 months have been more meaningful than the sum of my past lives. We ignite rebellious flames everywhere. Destroying company facilities, exposing corporate scandals, accumulating resistance, and talking about a better future at the highest tide. We even bombed the intelligent control center built by top companies like Pluto Deep Dive in the Nord resettlement area, paralyzing 70% of their drone power here. And they burned the brains of their regional managers, declaring our existence to the world and raising the flame of rebellion. Then, the spark was immediately extinguished by Pluto's slightly more serious dive. Even with the most pessimistic expectations, we still underestimated the power of the enterprise. It's like a giant stomping on a nest of ants, and my new home is once again destroyed by the company. Most of my bloodless family members were either killed or captured by the company's armed forces. The calm and cautious Commander Corette died, the stable and reliable Black Falcon. Brother 136 has been captured, but I guess Qian Xiaoying, who usually scolds and runs slowly, should have escaped. She always manages to escape, but it's okay, hope still exists now. Although the enemy shattered most of Icarus's power, they did not destroy the heart of the organization or the cornerstone that allowed Icarus to exist. The key to restarting Icarus, handling the victims, was ultimately handed over to me and locked in my memory slot. I am the last hope. For this, I must find surviving companions, I must inherit the will of those who sacrificed, I must continue to fight for this, I must live on. I cannot die here. I can't die here. Z-bang. In the moment of falling, the sound of the pulse pistol firing was pulled infinitely long, and my consciousness became long enough to make me look back on my life. My name is Liao Qi. I cannot die here. My name is Liao. I cannot die, in whose memory is that? As if waking up from a long nightmare, Jiang Zhou regained his consciousness. At the same time, the memories of Liao Qi, who belonged to the grassroots protesters in the Nord resettlement area, were turned into pure records and sealed away. If he does not actively recall, then memories will only be presented as pure intelligence. Jiang Zhou suddenly opened his eyes. Then, he saw unforgettable scenes of his life. In the blank virtual space, the previous color block humanoid transformed into a surging data stream and merged into its own substitute. At the same time, an electronic prompt accompanied by rolling subtitles reminded him. Theseus, your Mandala has been successfully authenticated and will automatically connect to the subnet of Deep Dive Warehouse number 3 in 10 seconds. But at the same time, he was also in a messy apartment filled with a musty smell in the air. I felt pain on my left thigh and forehead, as if it were pierced by burning steel bars. He collapsed on his back, looking up at the unfamiliar ceiling, and a middle-aged man with a beard all over his face and an electronic cigarette in his mouth. The other party is looking at him with ghostly eyes. Almost at the same time, he exclaimed in amazement with the middle-aged man with a whiskered beard holding an electronic cigarette. Sleeping slot. The electronic cigarette fell to the ground with a snap sound. No. 7. Tactical memory. You are listening at novel-full.audio. A person cannot exist in two places at the same time. This is like 1 + 1 cannot be equal to 3, it should be an axiom that cannot be proven. But at this moment, Jiang Zhou broke this axiom. His consciousness relied on two bodies, thus placing himself in two different positions at the same time. Theseus, who suffered from severe radiation sickness and had his body halfway buried, was imprisoned in the cold and deep-diving prison of Tartaros. The Icarus rebel army, named Liao Qi, was pointed to the head by a street mercenary at a cheap hotel in the Jiangzhou district on the -2nd floor of the Nord resettlement area. He is using the same consciousness to perceive two completely different scenes and simultaneously directing two bodies to react. This sounds equally incredible. It has always been difficult to do two things at once, and the vast majority of people cannot even draw circles with their left hand and squares with their right hand. Not to mention controlling two bodies simultaneously. But Jiang Zhou felt that he could handle it with ease, as if he was born with two bodies. He can control two bodies with equal focus, a substitute generated by connecting to the deep diving chamber through a brain-computer interface, which can be seen as an extension of the original body, and the behavior between the two will neither interfere with each other nor make him feel flustered. Just like a computer processing parallel processes naturally. Jiang Zhou couldn't find a suitable language to describe his feelings at the moment, as if he couldn't explain what a rainbow was to the blind. If it must be explained, for example, vision. The two visual images he sees through his two eyes at this moment are not roughly divided into left, right, or up and down like in the old era of two-player games. But rather seeing two different images in the same field of vision. Just like in Escher's paintings, seeing both angels and demons at the same time, alternatively, two different views on the Necker cube were maintained simultaneously, note asterisk. Jiang Zhou is very clear that this completely violates the mechanism of human brain operation. Or to put it another way, his perception at this moment is simply humiliating the primate brain's evolution of self-awareness over millions of years. From the perspective of a cognitive science scholar, at least, what he is experiencing now is a more incredible miracle than what he has experienced after traveling a long time and arriving 100 years later. As for the source that triggered this miracle, his identity had already been revealed to him at this moment. With his perception of Liao Qi's body, a very familiar symbol appeared in front of Jiang Zhou. That is an ancient double-sided deity pattern. One face looks back towards the past, and the other face looks forward towards the future. Jiang Zhou is very familiar with this pattern, or in other words, he will never forget this pattern in his lifetime. It was the logo of the Janus project he was responsible for 100 years ago. At the same time, a line of text prompts appeared in his sight along with this icon. The Janus system has been activated and new controllable elements have been launched. Controllable elements. What does it mean? Does it refer to the Icarus rebel army named Liao Qi? Jiang Zhou's consciousness passed through Liao Qi's eyes and turned to the street mercenary who was shouting and holding a gun at him. Because the previous person was shooting at his forehead with a loud roar, Liao Qi's ears were still in severe tinnitus, so he couldn't hear what the other person was shouting clearly. But all of this is not an illusion. There is no doubt that the newly activated Janus system is the super artificial intelligence that once blew up the whole internet. It seems that it is the existence of its own digital personality, which is left behind by its own kinship origin that still stays in the mortal world. Although I don't know how the other party achieved it through what principles, and I'm not sure what the other party's purpose is for doing so. But what the current Janus system can achieve is completely clear at a glance. At this moment, I have surpassed the nervous system buried in my body, projecting my self-awareness and occupying the unlucky young man named Liao Qi, who should have been shot to death. In other words, this is equivalent to having a body that can move freely outside the prison of Tartaros. Perhaps I can use this thing to help myself escape from the prison of Tartaros. Jiang Zhou thought to himself. Maybe I can survive with this thing. The symbol and reminder of Yanu's just flashed past Jiang Zhou's eyes. But what happened in this moment was far from so simple. If the employees of Tartaros Testing Institute have the leisure to spend several months carefully and manually checking the network fluctuation records for that day, they may have noticed that at some moment, there was an extremely short period of abnormal data fluctuation in the number 3 deep dive warehouse. The amount of data transmission at that moment was almost pulled into a straight vertical line. But because the duration of this fluctuation is too short, it is difficult to say whether it really existed. Therefore, the main control computer of the number 3 deep dive warehouse only ignored this abnormal situation as an accidental error caused by tidal fluctuations within the abyssal dark network or interference from cosmic rays, and even did not independently file and record it. On the other hand, after the disappearance of the symbol and prompt of the double-dot-sided god Janus, the third deep diving chamber successfully pulled the river boat into the subnet. The bright green grid lines spread out around him, extending to infinity, and then modeling and material loading began. After a dizzying transformation, Jiang Zhou found himself in a place similar to a field training camp. In front of him was a shooting range large enough to accommodate a battalion of soldiers for simultaneous training. And there are rows and rows of firearms and weapons around, which are dazzling to see. Before he could figure out where he was again, a familiar and enthusiastic voice came from behind him. "Hey! Native guy, you're really here. I thought those company dogs would frame you." Jiang Zhou turned around and passionately patted his shoulder with the black Falcon 136, whose eyes were still covered in a metal bottle cap. Behind the other party stood Qianxia Sakura and 2 other Icarus members who had previously fallen asleep in the carriage. They are each fully armed, wearing red and black colored armor. "Brother 136, is this the Abyss Dark Web?" Jiang Zhou asked curiously. The common sense learned through Liao Qi. Although Liao Qi has never dived, Jiang Zhou still has a rough impression of the Abyss Dark Web. A twisted and eerie cyberspace like a nightmare, with dangers lurking in every corner, countless dangerous malicious programs wandering in it, and even a little carelessness can lead to irreparable harm. But at this moment, the people in front of me all look very relaxed. Abyss Dark Web? Of course not. Even if those company dogs are crazy, they cannot kick us directly into that abyss without any training. This is the training ground. Upon hearing Jiang Zhou's question, 136 shook his head repeatedly and answered. Training ground. Jiang Zhou looked around not only the shooting range, but also all the tactical training facilities that he could imagine or could not imagine, all around them. And they are all compressed within the line of sight in a non-Euclidean geometric form. The space that truly exists here feels much broader than what can be seen. If this is a training ground, there is indeed no problem. After Jiang Zhou looked around, 136 continued to explain. The company dog gave us 24 hours of training time, allowing us to master the basic skills required for deep diving salvage. It also opened up many military-level tactical memory for us. It is said to be used to improve the survival rate of diving into the Abyss Dark Web salvage technology. For fear that we may not go crazy enough fast enough. At this moment, Qianxia Sakura walked over and took 130's words. In fact, this is a zone between the subnet and the Abyssal Dark Web, commonly referred to as the spiritual thin prison in the industry. We will complete the final adaptive training before going to hell here. For some reason, Jiang Zhou felt that the other party seemed somewhat wary of him. Did your previous behavior indeed cause the other party's distrust? Jiang Zhou thought helplessly. On the other hand, because I had previously browsed through the memories of Liao Qi, who was also a member of the Icarus Liberation Front, I gained a rough understanding of the character of Black Falcon 136, Qianxia Sakura, and several other members of the rebel army. At least what Liao Qi had known before his death. Now, Jiang Zhou has let go of many of his guard against them. In this era where super enterprises hold high like gods and control the fate of everyone, these people, for whatever reason, dare to engage in tragic and almost foolish struggles with those super enterprises, and it is difficult for them not to show respect for this alone. Therefore, he did not care about the other person's defensive attitude, but continued to maintain his previous amnesia persona, summarizing and confirming. That is to say, after training here for 24 hours, we will leave the spiritual thin prison and dive into the Abyss Dark Web to mine. Qianxia Sakura first nodded and then shook her head. For you, it's 12 hours. The time when you installed the brain-computer interface. We have already undergone 12 hours of training, and those company dogs won't delay the time for you alone. There are only 12 hours of training left, so hurry up. After 12 hours of training, he may not even know how to wield a gun. Fortunately, the other party's intention was not to let him really learn to shoot from scratch. Native brother, hurry up and absorb a few tactical memory blocks. Time is running out. 136 on the side said with a somewhat anxious expression. What is tactical memory? Jiang Zhou asked with a puzzled expression. Although he gained a considerable amount of common sense by searching Liao Qi's memories. Understanding that, tactical memory, is a real-time experience book designed to enable elite soldiers to learn coping skills in a very short period of time when encountering unexpected situations on the battlefield, but he still pretends to be ignorant as if he doesn't know anything. And to this, Qianxia Sakura replied with an unchanged expression. The memory with the most rough operation will take effect in seconds after insertion, directly building a reflex circuit in your brain. Yu reading www.yuukangshu.net forcefully packs the corresponding skills into it. Although convenient and fast, even for native people, this thing will seriously affect their minds. Therefore, there should be at least a 6-hour interval between two uses. Between words, the other party had already made a decision for Jiang Zhou to plug in the tactical memory provided by the company, even though the side effects were not small. Little brother, you are not an adjustment person, so you cannot load the enhanced righteous body on the substitute. And we are going to the depth 2 position, which is extremely dangerous for you. I cannot guarantee to protect you well. Therefore, although tactical memory may have a certain impact on your spirit, this is currently the only way to increase your chances of survival. 136 on the side also spoke up. When he said this, his expression looked very guilty. Jiang Zhou nodded slowly. 136 breathed a sigh of relief upon seeing this, then pointed towards the direction of the shooting range and said. I suggest you choose a tactical memory that specializes in precision shooting with medium-range rifles, so that you can stay in a safe position for cover shooting. With medium-range rifles, if you encounter danger, I will also have a rescue response. I would like to ask. Inexplicably, Jiang Zhou interrupted 136's words. Is there a tactical memory for close-range unarmed combat here? Ha! 136 looked at Jiang Zhou with a puzzled expression on his face. Could he be someone who doesn't have any enhanced righteous bodies and plans to engage in hand-to-hand combat with those malicious program doubles in the future? The latter nodded to indicate that he was not joking, and then added very seriously. It's better to be the type that can achieve unarmed gun grabbing. No. 8. Seize the gun. You are listening at novelfull.audio. The power of the Scorpio Pulse pistol is adjusted by a knob, with its lowest gear only enough to shatter a cheap mug, while its highest power can blast a person out of a large, translucent hole at a distance of 500 meters. Usually, an old snake does not want to kill while carrying out a mission, but at the same time, he does not want the other party to see this. Therefore, he likes to adjust the knob of the pistol to a very delicate position. It can create enough deterrence, but not too violent to miss. However, when the other party is a dumbfounded young man who would dare to directly take the gun when he is pointed at his head, all his preparations lose their meaning. Pull the trigger and the high-energy pulse beam hits the opponent's head without bias. The pulse beam vaporized the opponent's scalp in an instant, drilled through the hard skull, and then effortlessly penetrated the opponent's brain. Just like arrows piercing through the morning mist. As expected, the other person collapsed on their back. In general, no, even in extraordinary circumstances, if the other party is injured to this extent, they should be 100% dead. But, my CNM, lie back, don't get up. Lie down. Otherwise, I'll keep shooting. My CNM. Watching the young man with half of his head pierced through as he tried to get up, the old snake almost frightened and pointed a gun at the other person, shouting loudly in excitement. In fact, after seeing such a eerie scene, he didn't continue to pull the trigger and directly empty the magazine, which can be considered calm enough. The young man who sat up from the ground looked at him with a puzzled expression, as confused as a person who had just woken up from a nap. It wasn't until the old snake repeated its roar several times that the other person finally tilted their head. Then the person pointed to their ear, as if indicating that they didn't hear clearly. This is natural, the previous shot was almost fired against the opponent's ear. The roar of indoor gunfire made the old snake's ears buzzing. It was extremely normal for the other person to briefly lose their hearing as a result. However, the other party's action made the old snake slightly calm down. Although it is unbelievable that the young man in front of the Icarus Liberation Front can still get up again after being hit with a piercing head, at the end of the day, he is just a natural human with a physical body. If that's the case, what else does he need to be afraid of? After realizing this, the old snake broke free from its previous panic. The current situation is that the other party is unarmed, without any physical modifications, and has a hole in their head. No matter what supernatural factors the other party is based on and still alive, it is impossible for them to become stronger due to the penetrating wound on their head, right? Compared to others, both of his hands have undergone reinforcement and transformation of the prosthetic body. Although he is not an adjusting person, he cannot use the prosthetic body as smoothly as those who have undergone neural adjustment, and can operate naturally with the help of thoughts. But dealing with a native person who is almost entirely original, it is still a matter of easy control. Not to mention, I still hold a Scorpio-type pulse pistol in my hand today. A high-end precision product, the limited edition intelligent weapon of the Zodiac, launched by Mars War Technology in the 40th year of the lunar calendar. Can be connected to the prosthetic body of the arm, controlling the arm to automatically aim and correct the gun line. After turning on the full intelligence mode, you can adjust your output by evaluating the enemy's threat level. It can be said that with such a gun, the intermediaries in the Nord resettlement area would give priority to assigning tasks. Just like in the Edo period, when landlord families hired ronins, they would evaluate their martial arts level based on the quality of their swords. Thinking of this, the old snake tightened its grip on the gun handle. At this moment, the seasoned and composed street mercenary has returned to himself, and he can even allocate his energy to deduce what possibility the other party has for a comeback. Trying to come over and grab the gun again. Are you joking? Unless the opponent immediately inserts a military-grade, tactical memory, specialized in close-range unarmed combat, as a native, he doesn't even have the qualification to resist. But this is also completely impossible, because the old snake had clearly seen that this person only had one memory slot installed. The memory encapsulated inside happens to be the legacy of the Icarus Liberation Front, the target of his mission. Thinking of this, it was estimated that the other person's hearing would also be restored. The old snake cleared his throat and loudly advised. Don't be stubborn, young man. Give me your memory. Having offended the companies under the Olympus order, your Icarus Liberation Front has been completely abandoned, and whether that thing is meaningful or not is not significant. Moreover, God knows how many gangs outside are coveting the inheritance you left behind, so it would be easier to hand it over earlier. You don't want to just die on the streets like this, do you? The old snake spoke and extended the hand without holding the gun towards the opponent. The principle that a man is innocent and blames others is timeless in human society. When Icarus was at its peak, the entire bottom of the Nord settlement was their sphere of influence, and all the gangs at the bottom would converge and settle down. And now that Icarus has been completely wiped out, how could those silent gangs not take advantage of the situation and fight for inheritance? Especially when they heard that Icarus still had a small, universal printer in his hand, it made almost all gangs flock to it. This miracle completed by the super-artificial intelligence Janus, in the era of Great Shock, even if only one was obtained, is enough for the force that owns it to become a legitimate violent group qualified to sign security employment contracts with the resettlement area government. Therefore, the employers who are currently hanging bounties for the remaining Icarus personnel are not even the Pluto Deep Dive Company, but other gang forces in the Nord resettlement area. For those super enterprises, this level of thing is insignificant. The key is to regain face in this matter and act as a deterrent to potential rebels. But for the gangs in the resettlement area, and even for the government in the resettlement area, universal printer that can design blueprints for AI technology relics in the Abyss Dark Web and give concrete shape in the underlying reality, is truly precious. At this moment, there seems to be a clue related to the universal printer in the memory of the young man's slot in front of the old snake. Give me that memory, I promise I'll give you a way out. Without considering how much credibility his words would have after blowing the other person out of his mind, the old snake advised him again. At this moment, the young man who woke up again after being hit with a headshot no longer had the same excited expression as before. Who hired you? How did you know I was here? The person asked, his voice a bit hoarse. This is not a problem you should worry about. Give me your memory and don't force me to make a second hole in your head. The old snake continued to threaten with a serious expression, while quietly pushing the knob to increase the power of the pistol with its thumb. If even the penetrating damage to the head cannot kill the opponent, then adjust the power of the weapon to the extent that one shot can shatter the opponent's head. He doesn't believe the opponent can still get up again like this. The location of this safe house should only be known by 3 people at UU reading www.uukangshu.net. Black Falcon .136 from the operation team, Qianxia Sakura from the hacker team, and Booker from the intelligence team. So, Booker hired you, right? The young man looked like a different person compared to before. He first calmly looked around, then ignored the gun's warning and stood up dragging his already limp right leg. I don't know, the tone of the old snake sounded more like, you shut up for me. Of course, on the other hand, he really doesn't know. This can also be considered as a rule in their profession, where employers and employees know each other's information less and are safer. Generally speaking, necessary information exchange is carried out through intermediaries. Also, if it were that guy, he wouldn't have appeared on his own. The person chuckled to himself and muttered to himself. Seeing the other party's confident reaction, the old snake was somewhat confused. If it weren't for the drone he had previously released still guarding outside, he might have suspected that the other party was waiting for reinforcements now. Just as he was about to say something harsh to threaten him, the person directly reached into their memory slot and pulled out a silver flashing memory from inside. Didn't you want this? Here you are, it's connected. Compared to the other party's previous attitude of treating death as if returning home, the other party is terrifyingly talkative at this moment. Just before the old snake could react, the person threw the memory directly towards their face. And as the old snake nervously reached out its hand, intending to take the memory in mid-air, the other person suddenly rushed towards the hand holding the gun. No. 9. Take me to meet him. You are listening at novelfull.audio. What model is this gun? Jiang Zhou picked up a pistol from the weapon rack that looked somewhat like a crossbow and asked the Black Falcon 136 beside him. Scorpio-type pulse pistol, why do we even have weapons from Mars war technology here? 136, who was picking on the weapon rack, turned around and glanced at the gun in Jiang Zhou's hand, muttering uncontrollably. Is it useful? That's all for the weapons in the Zodiac 12 Palaces series, most of them are flashy. At least for adjusting people, the collectible value is far greater than the practical value. Are you thinking of choosing this, Theseus? Seeing Jiang Zhou carefully reading the instructions for using the Scorpio-type pulse pistol, 136 immediately asked. Because it's a bit strange to always call her native brother, and Qianxia Sakura also said she can't help but call her cave-dwelling person. Therefore, these Icarus people combined and used the code name Theseus given to Jiang Zhou by the previous company manager as his temporary name. Look at the introduction above, isn't it quite strong? Jiang Zhou asked after him. A video window automatically popped up next to the pistol, playing a demonstration of its power experiment. A dazzling high-energy pulse whistling, and in the blink of an eye, a goat used for live experiments was burned through from a distance of hundreds of meters. You can't believe this kind of seller show, it's the state of maximum power liberation. When fully charged, only 3 shots can be fired. And due to the design of the cooling system, in the high-end position, this gun will have a cooling interval of more than 3 seconds between each shot. 3 seconds is enough time for adjusting the person to do too much. 136 reluctantly took down the pistol in Jiang Zhou's hand and put it back on the weapon rack, continuing. Everyone's backpack is limited, or to put it another way, the amount of intelligence that each stunt double can carry for diving is limited. It's better not to waste space on this toy-like weapon. Jiang Zhou nodded in confusion and then asked casually. In other words, when I encounter someone who holds this type of gun, as long as I dodge the first shot in a high-power gear, there is a 3-second window enough for me to seize the gun. 136 nodded first and then asked with a puzzled expression. Although it's true, why do you keep worrying about grabbing the gun with your bare hands? It's nothing, I'll just ask casually. So the key is how to dodge the first shot. Looking at the street mercenary holding a gun at him, Jiang Zhou thought to himself. Observation, analysis, evaluation, tactical possibilities. This is the combat technique I just learned through that tactical memory. Although not proficient in using it, it's like cramming knowledge points on the eve of an exam. But compared to a few minutes ago, when I was completely unaware of the battle, this was a completely new transformation. Adrenaline surges, heart rate accelerates, blood pressure rises, and the brain blocks the pain that hinders combat one by one. Liao Qi's 5 senses became more sensitive, and the brain's protective limitations on muscle and bone output were also lifted. Observation, analysis, evaluation, tactical possibilities. Following the combat experience provided by the tactical memory, Liao Qi took the memory out of his own slot. This was the purpose of the opponent's trip, and also the only chip in his hand at this moment. Later, he threw the chip towards the opponent's face, exchanging it for a momentary shake, and at the moment when Liao Qi threw his memory towards him, the tense-old snake lifted its gun body. The pulse pistol connected his robotic arm and automatically corrected the trajectory. This time, the enhanced high-energy pulse power is enough to smash the opponent's entire head into pieces. He has repeatedly given the other party opportunities. Since the other party doesn't cherish it so much, there's no need to be polite and just pull the trigger. But just as he was about to shoot, the old snake discovered a problem. When the memory was thrown towards me, the trajectory I traced happened to be in a straight line with the other person's head from my own perspective. If you immediately pull the trigger now, the high-energy pulse will shatter the opponent's head along with the memory in mid-air. Helpless, the old snake could only slightly shift the muzzle towards the lower left and aimed at the opponent's torso. Z-bang. The charging sound of the coil and the starting sound of the cooler sounded simultaneously, and a pulsed beam of light sprayed out from the muzzle. At the same time, the other robotic arm of the old snake, who had not held the gun, firmly grasped the memory in mid-air. Okay, the commission has been, bang. Something suddenly hit him, and a huge force knocked him down firmly to the ground. What? It turned out that the other party, disregarding the penetrating wound on their own leg, suddenly jumped up and collided with him with their own momentum. The shot I just fired, due to the opponent's sudden jump, only penetrated the opponent's thigh once again and did not cause fatal damage. When the old snake shifted its attention from its memory, the other person had already rushed directly to him and pressed his chest against the pulse gun in his hand. The old snake suddenly continued to pull the trigger, but Scorpio, whose radiator had not yet cooled down, could only make a hollow, click, sound. You. Before he could take any further action, the young man who knocked himself down directly pressed his knee against his neck. At the same time, his hands wrapped around his own hand holding the gun, attempting to snatch it away. For such behavior, the old snake is not surprised but happy. My own hands are both industrial-grade prosthetic hands. If it comes to strength, it is not something that the other person, a natural person with a physical body, can casually touch porcelain. Want to break open your fingers and take the gun off? Innocent. With just a little force, the opponent's bones will immediately shatter with a click. Like magic, the old snake clenched its two metal fingers on the pistol and was removed by the other person. The other party did not attempt to forcefully break their own fingers at all, but instead used force along the weak point of the prosthetic joint, in the direction of their own strength, to remove the two fingers. That movement was as smooth as those most skilled prosthetic doctors. After removing their two fingers, Scorpio, who is tightly held in their hands, has space for movement. I saw the other person's finger reaching into the gap and pulling, and the gun fell into their hands. At the same time, the heat dissipation of this Scorpio-type pulse pistol has just been completed, returning it to a state where it can be fired at any time. But this time, the muzzle was on his own head. What's going on? The old snake suddenly became confused. Why did the previous stunned youth suddenly become as skilled as a 100-battle veteran with over 10 years of combat experience? Before he could say anything, the person pulled his face in and looked at him. The old snake can even see its frightened face through the calm pupils of the other person. If you want to survive, take me to meet the intermediary you hired. But the old snake still wants to struggle. Take me to see him. The other party repeated it. Okay. Okay. No. 0 oath. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Black Falcon .136 hopes that Jiang Zhou can join the Icarus Liberation Front. After familiarizing Jiang Zhou with some of the weapons he may use, the bottle cap elder brother couldn't help but solemnly talk about this matter. According to the provisional agenda of the Icarus Liberation Front, as long as one official member is recommended and receives the vote of the other 3 official members. After a simple oath-taking ceremony, any adult with the ambition to overthrow the Olympian order, establish a new rank, and maintain a normal and stable mental index can join the Icarus Liberation Front and fight for the freedom and dignity of all human souls. Of course, to register as a formal member, there is also a series of paperwork and procedures to be done. However, in emergency situations, all of this can be simplified. So what's your opinion? 136 looked at Jiang Zhou with a serious expression and asked. You may not believe it when you say it, but in fact, I am already Jiang Zhou thought to himself. As a controllable element of the Yanu's program, Liao Qi was originally a member of the Icarus Liberation Front. Even not long ago, he fought alongside you guys. In fact, what Jiang Zhou will do next to manipulate Liao Qi's body can be said to be continuing Icarus's struggle and battle. Of course, he naturally cannot say these words. Faced with the other party's generous invitation, Jiang Zhou pretended to hesitate for a few minutes before nodding in confusion, indicating that he was still willing. Of course, in fact, he is quite willing, and the reasons for his willingness are also very simple. One reason is that after reading Liao Qi's memories, he felt sincere admiration for the cause of the Icarus Liberation Front. Secondly, in the Icarus Liberation Front's program, the biggest enemy that the organization ultimately aims to defeat is the super enterprise alliance called the Olympus Order. And the initial initiator of this alliance is highly likely to be their former employer, who gave their cross-generational scientific research achievements to the Olympian group that they own. Jiang Zhou has no reason not to contribute his own strength to completely overthrow this alliance. Even now, he is weak and the other party almost controls the entire world. Of course, besides that, there are also some more realistic and urgent reasons at present. Not long after, I will dive into the Abyss Dark Web with 4 other members of the Icarus Liberation Front. Being a member of them and narrowing the distance with these teammates undoubtedly increases one's survival rate in the future. Furthermore, I can also more naturally inquire about the Icarus organization from these people. In this way, while controlling Liao Qi's actions outside, one can also gain some advantages in intelligence. B6, this kind of thing is very meaningless. At this moment, Qianxia Sakura, who was debugging her weapons on the side, raised her head upon hearing their conversation. She first glanced at Jiang Zhou, then turned her gaze to 136 and said, "Not to mention whether the organizational structure of the Icarus Liberation Front still exists after being hit by Pluto Deep Dive Company, nor to consider the probability of us escaping from Tartaros in the future. But you have also heard what Theseus said before. As a person suffering from severe radiation sickness, whether or not he can survive and return from the Abyss Dark Web, his life is only a little over a month." Throughout her speech, Qian Xiaoying did not look at Jiang Zhou, but instead looked very seriously at 136's bottle cap eyes. So, whether he joins or doesn't join Icarus has no meaning. Finally, she summed it up like this. But regarding this, Black Falcon 136 looked back at Qianxia Sakura with a serious expression and slowly said, "Qianxia Sakura, every resistance has meaning. At the very least, for Theseus himself, whether he died as an innocent person caught up in the company's conspiracy or as a warrior rebelling against the company's order, the significance of the two is vastly different. Moreover, I owe him as much as possible to keep him alive. It was my idea to suggest hiding in that warehouse." 136 spoke and opened a display screen in mid-air. The above depicts 136's own human body modeling. Jiang Zhou noticed that there are many referential markers for prosthetics and implants in the modeling, marked with different colors and symbols. While clicking on the pattern on the modeling, 136 continued to say, "The person in charge of Deep Dive Warehouse number 3 has previously stated that if they determine that we have the ability to descend deeper than Depth 2 to perform the task, we will have an opportunity to use the company's internal, universal printer, to reinforce our bodies with prosthetics and implants. And the Theseus brothers also have the opportunity to undergo neural adjustment and transformation, becoming adjustment people like us." Qianxia Sakura frowned and said, "Didn't I say that? No matter whether Theseus can come back alive from the Abyss Dark Web or not, he suffers from radiation sickness." "Wait a moment, B6, you're not thinking again, are you? Don't tell me, you're going to." 136 nodded and opened an implant marker in the pattern, which was used to model the position of his own body and head. A device installed in the orbitofrontal cortex, the size and shape of a fava bean. All in all, it resembles a metal fava bean and is instantly magnified. Qianxia Sakura held her breath, as if she was holding back her profanity. Pegasus. A previously captured Apollo biological brain implant with a Depth 3 quality. The instructions indicate that after installation, it can automatically repair the vast majority of brain damage, including symptoms of radiation sickness. Previously, due to my unstable mental index, I never bound my mandala. After 136 finished speaking, he didn't care about Qian Xiaoying's next foul words. He turned to Jiang Zhou beside him and looked at him seriously, saying, "However, the prosthetics and implants on my body are both the property of the organization, so they can only be handed over to comrades who are also Icarus. So live on, survive the first dive, and live until we can carry out more dangerous missions. At that time, I will transfer this transformation authority to you, and your illness will be saved. So, are you willing to join the Icarus Liberation Front?" Sure enough, looking at the other person's gaze, Jiang Zhou couldn't help but sigh. This old man named 136 has always been haunted by their involvement as an innocent person. Including taking care of oneself all along, patiently answering all of one's questions, and hoping to join Icarus, all are expressions of calming one's guilt. Faced with this sense of guilt, Jiang Zhou's mood at this moment is very complex. It seems no problem to say that one is innocent and involved in it. After all, I just closed my eyes and traveled through 100 years, appearing on the train sent to Tartaros. Before fully understanding the current situation, I was told that I was being treated as a rebel and had to have my frontal lobe cut off. In the end, I used my terminal illness as a bargaining chip in exchange for an opportunity to use it as a mining card to mine and take the blame. But if Jiang Zhou were to reveal his identity as the first deep.sea diver to them at this moment and they truly believed him, he couldn't imagine what would happen. Of course, no matter what, having hope of being cured of one's terminal illness is always a good thing. He naturally wouldn't refuse such an opportunity. So, Jiang Zhou took a deep breath. Of course, I am willing. I am willing, not just for the possibility of being rescued. Although I can't remember many things that happened in the past, my intuition tells me that the world shouldn't be the way it is now. And for this, I am willing to fight with you all. When Jiang Zhou said this, he didn't look at 136, but instead at the other 3 Icarus members behind him, including Qianxia Sakura. According to Icarus's manifesto, having only a recommender is not enough, and 3 other formal members need to raise their hands to vote for approval. So, what he just said was for a few of them to listen to. With Liao Qi's memories and familiarity with each other's personalities, Jiang Zhou naturally knows what words can move them. Except for Qianxia Sakura, the 2 of them exchanged a glance, then shrugged their shoulders and raised their hands in agreement. There was naturally more person and more strength right now. Meanwhile, Qianxia Sakura was biting her lower lip and staring at 136 with wide eyes. Black Falcon 136's gaze turned from the hands raised by the other 2 to Qianxia Sakura, who was staring at him. So are you really planning to give him the depth 3 brain implant? You almost died for it back then, don't you even remember? Qianxia Sakura, what's your opinion? Without answering her question, 136 urged. Qianxia Sakura was choked by the other party's attitude and took several deep breaths before calming down. You're such an idiot. After speaking, she also raised her hand. Black Falcon nodded and then looked back at Jiang Zhou. So the temporary vote was unanimously passed. Theseus, please take the oath with me. I swear, I volunteer to join the Icarus Liberation Front. Jiang Zhou took a deep breath and read along. I swear that I volunteer to join the Icarus Liberation Front. From the depths of the abyss and the dark web to the edge of the underlying reality, I volunteer to fight tirelessly for the continuation of the flame of all human beings' intelligence and the freedom of the soul. With this as my oath, I will rest until death. After finishing the last sentence, Zhu Lin put down his hand pressed on his chest and looked at the blurry man at the other end of the holographic projection, carefully asking. Is it enough to recite this oath? That's it. You are now a member of the Icarus Liberation Front. Congratulations. The blurry man at one end of the screen spoke and clapped his hands. Upon seeing this, Zhu Lin immediately agreed and extended his hand to applaud for himself, then smiled obsequiously and said. In other words, after restarting Icarus's universal printer, I also have the permission to use it. Sir, you may not know how much business a universal printer of the AD model can bring. Your organization, no, our organization has been too conservative in its use in the past. The technical drawings dug up by those abyssal wanderers from the Abyssal Dark Web, as well as the modification rights of the righteous body, can only be realized through these things. Only those large companies have the financial and human resources to crack the technology and build product lines. Your current contribution to the organization is far from reaching the level of permission to use universal printers. The man on the other side of the holographic projection interrupted Zhu Lin's incessant chatter with a sharp, processed voice, and the latter immediately fell silent. After a while, the other party continued. However, regarding your belief that we were too conservative in the past, you are only half right. Previously, Icarus was too conservative in what was supposed to be radical, but what was supposed to be conservative was more radical than anyone else. Now that we have encountered such changes, we should also change. The man in the projection seemed to be lost in thought when he said this. Right. You're absolutely right. There's no organization that's still so poor with a universal printer. And it's all this time, and traditional mental index tests need to be done before installing prosthetics and implants. Upon seeing this, Zhu Lin nodded his head like pounding garlic. Interrupted by such an interruption, the man in the projection refocused his gaze on Zhu Lin. I understand your enthusiasm for making money, but I don't think I need to remind you again. I don't have the authority to start that universal printer right now. If you really want to start your business earlier, you should retrieve that memory as soon as possible. Zhu Lin smiled confidently at the words. Please rest assured that the street mercenary old snake I sent has never failed in this job. He is just a primitive without any modifications, and for him, it's just a matter of sprinkling water. I hope things really go as smoothly as you said, otherwise. Otherwise, what? That person hasn't finished speaking. The remote call projection hung up. At this moment, Zhu Lin suddenly realized that he was covered in a cold sweat behind his back. TMD, what a cow. It's just a dirty rat being kicked out by the company to hide from XZ. He cursed softly. If it weren't for the right to use the universal printer, he wouldn't have condescended to join the Icarus Liberation Front. Liberate the souls of all universal beings. Laughing to death, does the super-artificial intelligence, Janus, fall within the category of human intelligence and life? Does he need you ants to liberate? Funny. Zhaozhuiyuan.com. After secretly cursing a few more words, Zhu Lin inserted a newly opened, pink package into the interface of his occipital bone and felt waves of dopamine stimulation in his brain, which completely improved his mood. After I receive the memory that can restart the universal printer in Icarus, the initiative of the matter will no longer belong to you. Relaxing all over, Zhu Lin, slumped in his seat, thought to himself. Isn't that guy just relying on himself as a depth 2 adjuster? Guess how many adjusters in the entire Nord resettlement area would be willing to take action to kill someone if I revealed a little bit of my own universal printer restart permission? How many gangs are willing to cooperate with me? It's really pitiful, because they are members of the same organization who have also taken an oath, and they dare not even face it themselves. We also have to rely on intermediaries like ourselves to hire street mercenaries, disguised as accidents. Well, if it weren't for this, how could I get such a good opportunity again? Zhu Lin, who was lying on the chair, showed a silly smile on his face under the influence of the pink color. As the saying goes, good things come in pairs, and it is also at this time that a communication is received. Caller. Lao Shi. Zhu Lin quickly connects. How about it, have you received the item? Of course, it's a simple task. The other party replied with full confidence. That's using the old method of inspection. I'll give you an additional 30% of the reward this time. I don't know if it's this good news or the effect of the pink color, but Zhu Lin feels very happy at this moment. No, this time I want to personally come and deliver the goods. We can also have a drink together. And the old snake on the other end of the phone said unusually.